Hey everybody, my name is Professor Marshall and I'll be doing a quick research presentation on crime for you. My in-person hybrid class asked me to do a dry cut for them just to kind of give them some examples of a video recording, so I figured I would share it with everybody here. So hello hybrid people and hello all my online people. So my main topic is going to be crime, and well, why am I interested in crime? My hybrid folks know that we have this joke that I'm a serial killer, but that's definitely not true. But if you might recall when you're getting to know me video or just during Deviance Week, criminology, the study of crime and why crime happens, is how I was basically introduced to the study of sociology. So utilizing these multiple lenses and trying to figure out exactly why crime is happening, why do people fear crime, or just their perceptions of it and how to alter these perceptions, and just the control of society has on life. All that stuff was just so fascinating to me, and so I just decided to do a quick kind of presentation on that. Perception of crime is also critical in research because there's always crime going on. We don't live in a society of saints, like Durkheim said, and even if we did, crime would still happen. So obviously, my research is connected to sociology because one main avenue of soc is crime and deviance, right? Deviance is anything up against the norm. This perception of crime, so what is actually happening around us, kind of connects also to our examination of Berger and Luckman's construction of social reality. So we might think our own reality is just super duper crime ridden, when in actuality, it might not necessarily be so. So my research motive was just basically to understand how crime is presented in the media. And my first article was from 2004 in examining American and Canadian television crime stories. Mainly, some of these reasons are kind of up on the board here. And the main purpose of this study was just to basically see what kind of differences are there in TV coverage of crime in Canada as well as in the US. So kind of seeing how the different coverages impact based on the nationality of the news station. And these are just some key points that the authors are examining, thinking about the inaccurate representations of crime and justice in regards to, say, perhaps the race of perpetrators or the race of victims, the gender of victims, all of that. And it's very rare for crime stories to include the motivations of crime or the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. You just basically hear about the crime that's been occurring and maybe a sentencing, and that's basically it, the motive as to why people done it, and that's not necessarily focused on. So it's usually more individual. And you also kind of have to think about the different types of crime that are reported, in the sense that it has to be exciting, especially in the 24-hour news cycle. So in this study, they analyzed 4 different news stations, and we can kind of see where we are here, SNC, and then the 2 American news stations, and then 2 Canadian news stations. And then they did what's known as a content analysis of basically what the different types of crime these news stations were reporting on. And then here are the results. I won't go into too much of the statistics and things like that, but you can kind of see, based on the ones that I highlighted in this table, you're examining the different type of crime, the country, so whether it was the US or Canada, as well as the type of market that they were running to, so a larger market or a small market, and then the region that the news was reported into, so local or national. And I highlighted the largest differences that they came up with. And if you can kind of see, just as a kind of basic examination of it, these large differences aren't necessarily that large, which was one of the main findings of this study, was that the reporting between the US and Canada, it was basically the same. There wasn't really much of a difference to it. So they then used what's known as the propaganda model as to explain why there were so few differences on it, regarding basically the profit that these stations have to take, as well as they need income via ads. So You have to maintain audiences and maintain your ratings, right? Kind of thinking about the whole marketing aspect of life, as well as thinking about this law and order philosophy, right? We have to kind of talk about what's happening. Police are taking action, boom, boom, boom. So especially depending on the types of sources that they're utilizing as well. So that's just a couple of things that this article discussed. My second article was more on the consumption as well as perception of fear of crime, and particularly they wanted to examine the different race and ethnic differences. This is from 2012, so a little bit more recent. These two are still a little bit old, and they basically, in their literature review, examine the three different types of hypotheses on how fear is created within the media. There is what's known as the cultivation hypothesis, the resonance hypothesis, as well as the substitution hypothesis. The cultivation hypothesis is examining the consumption of TV. So the thought is the more consumption of TV that you're using, the more fear of crime that you have. So, however, this has been disputed in research, thinking about different additional demographics such as age, race, class, gender, as well as the neighborhood factors. All of those have an impact on the mitigation of that. So that's found not to be true. There's also what's known as the resonance hypothesis, where if something resonates with you, so if it kind of meshes with your ideas, you're kind of going to be more acceptant of it. And then the substitution hypothesis is if you don't really have any experience with this particular type of crime or whatever, you're just going to have media kind of influence you a little bit, so to speak, because you don't have any experience with it. So, and different media, I learned, have different approaches to reporting crime. TV is more episodic, thinking about like different episodes, both in the newsroom as well as the TV drama shows, right? TV reality crime drama shows. There we go. So like NCIS, Law and Order, all those other ones. So thinking more crime is more individual rather than societal. So focusing more on the individual. Whereas newspapers are more thematic, going for more themes. And thinking about it in terms of race, in some other studies, Blacks' fears were increased with consumption of local and tabloid news, crime-based reality shows, and crime dramas, but not necessarily whites. And then when it came to newspapers, when it was a primary source for Latinos, there wasn't really much of an effect, but when papers were a primary source for whites regarding crimes, they were less afraid, which is a little bit interesting. And then the authors also take a very long time to examine how exactly we have to define what the fear of crime is, right? Are you afraid of being robbed? Like that's a pretty basic answer, but there are so many different ways from a research point of view how we can ask these different questions. So they conducted their study and they found basically three main key points of their study regarding the perceived realism of content. So is something real? Do we kind of mesh with that? The actual content that's being portrayed and how that content is being framed and how often. All of these kind of were tied together towards a person's fear of crime. However, their study, if you recall, was examining the differences in race and ethnic groups. There was a lack of difference between these. However, across all ethnic and races, the local TV news did elevate the perception and fear of crime in all aspects. So that was a little bit interesting too. So in both of these articles, in the first one, there were only 4 news stations being examined, so we can't really generalize too much about the differences between Canadian and American reporting on crime. In addition to, there are so many different types of media for both the first article as well as the second one, and the changes in media. So for instance, back in 2004, nobody was really using news. TV was mainly the key thing. Cable companies were a huge thing. Nowadays, we might just get most of our news from our phones and push out notifications and apps and things like that. So the rapid changes in media are not accounted for within these studies. My overall conclusion is that the consumption of media is impacting the fear of crime. So in future research, they could examine more news studies. You could examine different aspects of the US even, right? Because there's totally different cultures within there, as well as how the different media perceptions might utilizing it. Say, for instance, if you use an app to get your news versus a television versus a newspaper, right? Now, not many people use a newspaper anymore, I don't think. So how does that work out? As well as, say, for instance, maybe you get your news via TikTok or something like that. How does that kind of impact your fear of crime? So my thoughts were these were quite complex articles due to the statistics that were being utilized. So I had a hard time. That's why mine is a little bit over the time as well, which is totally fine for your presentations. Article 2 had a lot of statistics in them as well as terms to kind of figure out, and then Article 1 utilized a complex theory, the propaganda model, to explain exactly what was going on with their findings. However, I still love research, and that's why I'm kind of teaching for you guys. And then here are my works cited, since I cited Berger and Lechman, and then Callanan and Dowler were my 2 authors for my 2 studies. If you have any questions, please let me know, but this has been my example of a presentation in a really quick format. Thanks, and bye.